Kayla, we've got Nathan on the line. What do you want to ask him?
Nathan, I would love to hear more about your thoughts in regards to someone coming into multifamily investing without that previous real estate experience. What advice might you have to someone who doesn't have that background?
I think a lot of times, people get distracted, right? There's a shiny thing here and a shiny thing here. Honestly, I mean, you said you joined a mentor team. That's probably the most critical thing that I would say is, would recommend. I did it myself. I didn't mention that beginning, but you don't jump into dealing with $25-50 million properties where you have all this money on the line without doing that. And that's a lot of where your resources come from. And you know that, and that's why you join the mentor programs.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe with Four Oaks Capital. I'm very excited for today's show. We've got another one of our Ask the Expert episodes with two amazing people on the line. We've got an experienced investor, Nathan Justus, and a very motivated, aspiring investor, Kayla Wilmot. So I'm going to put biographies for both these individuals in the show notes. So if anybody wants to learn more about them, check out the show notes. But that said, Nathan, you're up first. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. So let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about your background and your history and kind of lead us up into what got you into apartment investing.
Yeah. So actually born in Virginia and raised overseas. My dad was actually active duty Navy, retired, and was a missionary over there. So completely different upbringing. Came to the States when I was 19, joined the Marine Corps, great 4 years. And then after that, didn't really know what I was going to do. And so I got into residential real estate, which was going great for the first couple of years. And then the market tanked and all of my progress to that point was basically wiped out and I had to start over. So at that point, I clawed my way into corporate America. Fortunately, I am employed, but unfortunately, I'm still in corporate America for now. We're gonna fix that here soon. But I think probably 4 years ago, I started to get the itch again that corporate America was not for me. I didn't really want to climb the ladder. I started to go down that process, but doors kept getting slammed in my face. And so I decided that wasn't for me and I was going to go back to full-time real estate. So, at that stage, it's like, okay, I need to brush up again, right? And figure out where I want to go because there's so many different avenues now, right? Self-storage, single family, et cetera, right? Anything you want to know. So I started educating myself like everyone else and actually ended up going to a conference about syndications, which really broadened, what I knew was out there, right? And it changed my mindset because I started going down the path of, maybe I'll acquire 5 single families a year on my own, but then realized, I could use other people's money to accelerate my progress in acquisitions and to get to this full time. That was an eye opener and I decided to go that direction.
Yep.
So I started getting, some single families and then immediately halted once I went to this conference and made a decision to go 100% into multifamily via syndication. So that's me up to now.
Nice. So, a lot of commonalities there. I mean, we briefly discussed before we started recording that we were actually at boot camp at MCRD San Diego at the same time. I think you had me edged out by a couple of weeks, but and we started the multifamily journey about the same time. And I'm just exiting, after 20 years of the Marine Corps, and you're looking to exit your corporate path. So a lot of similarities there. So from here, why don't you talk about a couple of the projects you guys have done, the multifamily project syndications that you guys have been able to do?
Yeah, actually, so I got started, officially started multifamily 2019. When was it? September, October. And it was, you're in that, okay, I need to build, relationships with brokers. I need to get out. There's just a whole lot that you need to take, right? That you need to get in line. And so started underwriting properties and, submitting LOIs. It was a challenge, but actually in 2020, I was able to get a property under contract. It was a 146 unit portfolio actually in Arkansas. So that was great. Fast forward, there was another deal that we had put an offer in that we didn't get, and it ended up coming back on the market. The buyers failed, And so ended up getting a second portfolio under contract before the first one had even closed. So we had two simultaneous deals, and those were my first two deals. So you're in that, you're learning a lot and trying not to screw up. You're using your resources, right? And doing that second one. So fast forward, we closed both of those in 2020. So we had COVID on top of that. So raising capital was a little bit more challenging, getting people off the fence. Fast forward now, all this year, we've been making LOI after LOI submission. However, I think there was a lot of funds that need to be deployed this year because everyone was on the sidelines last year. And so it's been very challenging, but we did actually get under contract just under 300 unit complex in Oklahoma. And we are set to close in September on that one. So all that to say, within, a year, we'll have, I'll have 3 properties, fingers crossed on this one we're in now and nothing goes wrong, but we'll have 3 properties closed. It'll be about 700 doors. So very, very exciting. And I do want to caveat that I do have 2 gentlemen that I work with, that I partner with exclusively, which really makes it work because all 3 of us are still full-time W-2 corporate people. And I don't know what I would do without them. There's so many balls in the air, especially when you have one deal and then a second deal pop up, right? So that was a lot, and it was fantastic to have those guys having my back.
Yeah, we've had more than one deal under contract a couple of times. There was one time where we put 2 offers out in the same week, and we're like, "There's no way we're going to get both," and boom, we got both. And it's just like, thank goodness for really good partners. At the time there were 4 of us on the team. We've since expanded slightly. But partnership route, I can't overstate how important that is. Incidentally, we are closing on an apartment today, and Congrats. I'm here doing a podcast because, my partner, who is the acquisitions guy, is taking care of everything. So it does definitely, magnify what you're able to do. And, we all started full time as well. So most of us are, I think I'm the last one coming off of a full-time job into this business, but great progress there. Now you tackled some big projects up front. You said your first one was 145 doors. Did I get that right?
140. Yeah, it's 140. There ended up being units that we couldn't use. And so I think at the end it was 145, 146 doors on that first project in Arkansas. And second project was 267. Doors. And then this third one is 288. So I think after you do your first deal and then second immediately right after, you realize, the work is the same. It's just the numbers game. And so, I would argue, I would rather go bigger because it scales faster. But I think the challenge there is that you're probably competing with more individuals when you get into that north of, I would say north of anywhere from, 160, 200. Once you start going up, you're competing more. And then if they have institutional money, then they're going to outbid you every time.
Yeah. Competition gets tight, when you get up there, and it's much more sophisticated people in that space, so we're in the same thing. I mean, our largest property is 167. The one we're closing on today is 144. And, jumping into that 200 plus unit space, it's just, you have a more sophisticated group of people you're competing with. So you've got to dot your I's, cross your T's, and sharpen your pencil and make sure that you can make the most competitive offer possible. So yeah, that said, sounds like you guys have done a great job so far. 700 units in 3 transactions. We're at 700 units in 9 transactions. Personally, I'd rather have done it in 3, but just the amount of work. It's a lot of work when you're dealing with multiple properties. But
it's just the same amount of work, but it is larger capital requirements, right? So you need to have a network of individuals that you can rely on to help, right? Example, this one we're just doing, right? We needed to do 200K in earnest money, and I'm not liquid enough right now to cover that. So we needed to bring in, right, an additional partner to cover that. So
yeah, and that's something that absolutely scales with the size of the properties. That earnest money deposit, it's still going to be roughly 1% of the money. The work doesn't scale, necessarily. You get 10 times as many units. The work doesn't scale 10 times, but that earnest money does. And we're getting about $250,000 back from earnest money that we have out on this property, and it's it's going to be nice to have it back in the accounts. So
yeah, liquidity is nice.
yeah, very nice, very nice. And one thing we've done is we've, like I said, it's our ninth property. We've not taken distributions, so all the money that we've earned so far is sitting in our corporate account, putting that money forward. But so the nice thing is we're not coming out of our back pockets now. But for the first several deals, it was, all right, who's cough it up, guys? Who's got money? We got to hit 120,000. Who's got it?
That's how it was for ours. Even when you're doing your, upfront. So we'll do an early access agreement when possible, because we don't want, our earnest money to. Most of it's just, it has to go hard now if you want to compete it all. Mm-hmm. And so with that early access agreement, we're still into these properties, multiple, tens of thousands of dollars, 20. In this case, we're north of 30,000, right? Even before earnest money. So, it takes a little bit. You got to pay to play. If you will, right? So, and then speaking of distributions, we actually just had our first distribution for that first property. So we promised in the PPM 12 months, and we were able to do the first distribution at month 9, and we would have exceeded our 1 year pro forma. We decided to hold a little bit back and be cautious, but we'll still exceed in our next distribution what the year 1 pro forma was. So we're pretty excited.
It's a great place to be. Making that first distribution was probably one of the most exciting things I've done. It's just like you're ready to hit the button, you get everything set up, all the ACH transfers all set up, and ready to hit the button. You're like, this is fun, guys. Boom,
yeah, that's it. I'll pull the covers back a little bit on that one. Man, when you're doing those first distributions, so we haven't hired a asset manager. The 3 of us asset managed, so it was. I call my wife my executive assistant because she assisted in doing the data entry component of getting all those accounts in there. And then it was, quadruple checking, reaching out to individuals, making sure their, data is still up to date. Hey, we're ACH, we're not wire, all those little details. And I think on our first one, it was about 40 investors. Mm-hmm. So try not to get accounts wrong on 40 investors because you don't want to lose their distribution. So it's not all about the acquisition. I think it's not talked about enough, the asset management back end side.
It does get tedious. It really does, and it's you got to make sure the routing numbers are correct. You got to make sure the account numbers are correct and everything's input properly. And once you transfer a distribution and if you send it to the wrong account, it's not coming back.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you can probably get it back, but it's going to take months. But yeah, that's something that's not talked about a lot. It's just that fact of, probably takes several hours to load every single, member's account information in there to get those transfers set up and everything else. But have a good banker. That's probably the best thing to do. I know we spend a lot of time on the phone with the, business banking section of Chase Bank, and they're walking us through everything at each point. It's like, okay, hey, we need to transfer money to 40 people, 80 people. We've got about 120 investors right now. So fortunately, it's not all, at the same time, but you got money coming from one account for this property to that group, another account from that property to that group. And it's tedious. So.
Yeah, it's great. I would say, any advice to anyone is find a strong relationship with the business banker before you're at a position where you're submitting. And if you're submitting an LOI, I would have already had that set up if you can. If not, then get on it now because it all happens quick. That LOI gets accepted and you've got the ball's rolling. You got 60 days or less. So. Rounds
down range, as Marines are apt to say. That rounds down range already. No pulling it back. But shifting gears a little, one question I like to ask everybody: what is your big burning why? What's your motivation for all of this?
Well, I like a challenge. I get bored easy. Once I achieve something, I need something bigger to achieve. But the cliche answer is, financial independence. I'm definitely there's the whole FIRE movement, right? Retire early, financial independence. I'm more on the fat FIRE side where I don't want to have to downsize my quality of life and lifestyle. And so really it's my extended family is a big part of it. So my dad was a missionary for 32, 33 years after doing a full 20 years in the Navy. I have a pretty large, extensive family with through adoptions. And I really get gratification out of being able to support my family and anyone that's in need and having your financial house in order. makes it a lot easier. And especially I think because I, essentially lost everything back in 2008, 2009, I have a real appreciation for, right, that struggle. And I just don't want money to ever be a reason why family can't get together or someone can't make this event or something like that. So that's a factor. Obviously, I would like to not be in W-2 and completely control my own time. All of those answers that everybody has, but deep down, I think that's the why. I do like Maui. I would love to get a condo there someday, but that's not the ultimate why. That's just a perk.
Yeah. We spent last week in Southern Utah doing a lot of four-wheeling and ATVing, and it's the same thing. It's like, we would love to be able to just have a big cabin, get everybody together at the same time, and cousins and brothers and sisters and everybody else. It's definitely a perk, but something that I really like, and this is, from a 90s movie, Forrest Gump, when he's talking on the park bench, he's just like, it's just one less thing, having money just means there's one less thing to worry about. But anyway, I like that. But so Nathan, next question for you. What's next?
Well, I think I maybe was alluding to it through the stories of the sizes of the opportunities. So we're absolutely, my partners and I are looking for, we're not turning our noses up at, we're just looking at a deal right now that has several 46, 56 units, but they're portfolios, right? Mm-hmm. Essentially we're looking to get into these larger portfolios. And so we really want to be a place that, anyone who brokers private equity, right? Mm-hmm. Or has connections with family offices or has a fund or manages a fund. We really want to be a place that those individuals come to for deals and opportunities. And that could be C-class, value add. If they're not looking to place their money in that vintage, then we are looking at Bs and even some potential As in some very hot markets. So, we'll leave contact info at the end, but that we kind of want to be a one-stop shop for those individuals that want quality deals. And we share underwriting, our thought process. Everybody says they're conservative, but there's ways to check that. There's ways to check that. So really that's us. It's going larger. We'd like to do at least at a minimum 3 of these 300 unit or so deals in a given 12-month period, if not more. I think especially once we're 100% full time, then that'll be dramatically more than that likely. Yeah. So, that's kind of the goal now. We've considered starting our own fund. It may be a little too soon for that, but we know there's a lot of capital out there that needs to be placed. And we just want to get our names out there that we are a strong team that has done well through COVID, exceeding our projections by more than 25% so far. It's about buying right and then operating, which is a big piece that is not talked about a lot, is the back-end operations, your property management company, and how tight you are on running that ship in the original business plan.
Oh yeah. Now one thing my partner used to always say, and he probably still will if pressed, but if you bought something in 2016, it was akin to being on top of a rocket ship. It doesn't matter what you do with operations, you're going to make a killing because cap rates went from like 8s on average to in a lot of places 4s now. So just that cap rate compression has doubled the value of property. So I don't think we're going to see that. I mean, with A and B class cap rates in the 4s right now, I don't think there's a lot of room for those to go back down. So operations is going to be where the money's made here in the future. So.
Yeah, we're always looking for those comfortable mom and pop, they were managed or, they've had the property for 10, 15, 20 years and they don't need to push the property, right? Or they just don't have the capital to improve it, to take it to that next step, right? That's something we're always looking for.
Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people are looking for. That's like the ideal right there, the mom and pop property that's been owned for 10 or 15 years. But man, I mean, when you find one, let me know. But anyway,
we're reviewing one right now.
Nice. All right. Well, that said, let's shift gears one more time and bring Kayla on the show. So Kayla, welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So pleasure having you on the show. It's been great. We've had a couple conversations before. Great getting to know you. And I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a little bit about your background and what's gotten you into multifamily.
Yeah, I'm actually a physician assistant, a PA by day. I recently graduated PA school and I work part-time in the medical field. I'm also a newlywed. My husband and I essentially wanted to create the future that we want for ourselves and for our families. And we found that real estate was the best, or one of the best, if not the best avenue to get there. So we ended up investing in a mentorship program, and we're just educating and excited to continue the multifamily journey.
Yeah, awesome. So newly graduated, newly married, congratulations on both. That's exciting times. So
thank you.
So physician's assistant, my daughter, the podcast editor, wants to eventually be a physician's assistant. So
oh, really? Awesome.
she's probably gonna, have a lot of fun with this one, but
tell her to reach out. I'd love to help her.
All right, she definitely will. So
Okay.
Anyway, that said, what's your focus right now on multifamily? What are you guys looking for?
Yeah, so we are looking in the Sunbelt region for value add deals, see properties in a good beat area with, similar to like Nathan said, the rents are below market, and maybe it's because the owner previous has had it for 10, 15 years and they just haven't, raised those rents, et cetera. But also we want to look at areas where maybe there's a path to progress coming in the near future, 50 plus units, and just where we can also make an impact on the residents' lives.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of key aspects right there, key attributes, places where you can add some value, you can make things better, and that's kind of the name of the game. So, question that I ask everybody, and you're going to get the same question: what's your big burning why?
For me, it's family, and for us, my husband and I partner together, and it's more so about buying time. If we can work now and put in the overtime now to develop the passive income that we want, it's going to buy time for us, for our children, to travel and do more of the things we love sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I love it. Get your own time back. Well, exactly. Kayla, we've got Nathan on the line. What do you want to ask him?
Yeah, so Nathan, I would love to hear more about your thoughts in regards to someone coming into multifamily investing without that previous real estate experience. I know that you mentioned that you did a lot of single family prior to, and then you went into the corporate world, but what advice might you have to someone who doesn't have that background?
Keep doing what you're doing. Don't try to go this direction. Or I think a lot of times, people get distracted, right? There's a shiny thing here and a shiny thing here. You're on the right track with multifamily for all the right reasons, and all the reasons that most people are probably listening to this podcast. Honestly, I mean, you said you joined a mentor team. That's probably the most critical thing that I would say is, would recommend. I did it myself. I didn't mention that at the beginning, but you don't jump into dealing with, right, 4 million, 10 million, 13, these 25, $50 million properties. We have all this money on the line without doing that. And that's a lot of where your resources come from. And that, and that's why you join the mentor program. So you're on the right track. Stay there. Definitely. Don't get discouraged.
Thank you.
Incidentally, I did mentorship too. And I can say the same thing. I wouldn't be where I was or where I am right now without the mentorship. So I agree. Keep going.
So I specifically with the mentorship, it's an educational program. So you learn a lot in those. However, there's no way they can teach you everything. So as two people, or Nathan, as someone who has gone through something similar, and then you've already tackled quite a few deals, what's something that you learned after the fact, or even more recently, that the educational program or mentorship just didn't quite get into you?
So a few things, right? The back end side, I think the educational groups are really good at the upfront acquisition piece, but there's really not training, anything to really prepare you for the asset management side. And I don't know if you plan to asset management. I think a lot do, at least in the beginning, because it's additional income. And so long as you have the time and somewhat of an accounting-ish, or project management exposure, then it'll work out for you. So that's one part is, and you don't really know what you don't know, right? Until you do it. So having systems in place for the back end business plan is something that I would say, you don't learn from the teaching, mentorship programs. The other thing is really how to choose your partners. I learned very quickly in our first deal that people will say one thing and behave a certain way, but then once the stress is turned up, you might be surprised what happens to your so-called partners. So thankfully not my direct partners, but the people you choose to partner with is very, very critical. And they do talk about that in mentorship programs, but there's no real guidance. And that's something you kind of have to figure out on your own, beyond you and your husband, who additionally you're going to partner with on these deals moving forward with you. And then really focusing on exit caps. So there are a lot of times when you're underwriting a deal, I'm not sure if you specifically are doing the underwriting.
Yep.
But the exit cap, honestly, I think, so people say, hey, what's the cap rate right now? Which no one really knows. They talk about it, and deals will sell at a certain, dollar per door. And so you can extrapolate what the cap rate is for a given market. But what's more important than that is the exit cap. And a lot of times I see deals coming through, and I really want to be a fly on the wall when they're underwriting these deals and say, how are you achieving these returns with what I know of this property after underwriting it myself? Maybe I'm not a great underwriter. Maybe I'm too conservative, but exit cap rate is what is when you're going to sell. And that's what lenders want to see is, hey, what's your exit cap? It's great that you think the market's at a, 4.85. We joke about like, oh, if the deal's not working, just drop the cap rate. Now it's a great deal, right? But the exit cap is something that's critical that I don't hear talked about a lot. And it's just something to pay attention to in your underwriting. So an example, if you want to be safe, right, you'll do an escalator, 1 point escalator, per year. And that's still, slightly aggressive. But that way you're not buying at a, 5.5 and then assuming you're going to sell at a 5 or 4.5, right?
Yeah.
It's more conservative to your investors. And if the deal works then, right, with that escalator, then it's probably going to be an even better deal when you do exit the deal, if that's part of your business plan.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll say the one thing that I learned, just adding to that, was, talking about partners, property managers are absolutely key. And I think the educational programs tell you that the property manager is the most important person, but actually figuring out, finding a property manager that works well with you has been a challenge that we have. And, we've cycled through a couple different property managers. They look good up front. They have these really nice glossy, brochures they hand you when you first talk to them and everything else. And, end of the day, we've had some significant problems with a couple of them, but that's been kind of the biggest learning point for us was, we need property managers who can, do exactly what they say they're going to do. So if I went back, I'd talk to a lot of the other property owners from that property manager before going forward.
Yeah, I would add to that. Honestly, we were, so interesting story on our first deal. We were 2 weeks out from closing and our property manager backed out and said he couldn't take our deal on because he had without saying it, he said there was another client that was worth more to him to take their deals on than us. Meanwhile, he lost out on 412 units just that year on, and then moving forward, this 300. So we're using the same property manager. So we had to find last minute another property manager. We interviewed like 4, and we ended up getting one that had 20 years experience, 14 years in that market, and had just branched off from that company to be a partner in another company. And she was going to lead the multifamily sector. And so we suddenly came to her. And so she was, 100% engaged so she could be successful in her own business in that year one to her partners. And she's made us very successful.
So let me ask you this. I know you guys both touched on partnerships, and me being with my husband, we are eventually planning on forming some type of partnership in regards to our base investment company. What kind of things do you look for, or do your partners each have specific jobs, or do you all kind of divide and conquer?
That's a great question. We consider that. So we kind of organically came together. The 3 of us were looking in the same markets, and we decided not to compete, instead join forces. But in the process of going through the deals, you figure out what your strengths are. So if you can figure out that, before, I call it, having a kid together, which is what we, you buy properties together and you're committed for 6 or 7 years, however long your business is. So I guess understanding the skill sets up front would be helpful. In our case, yes, we do have roles that each of us kind of focuses on. But that's kind of organically happened over time, right? So, I mean, for now, all 3 of us are in acquisitions for sure. Some of us have more strengths, when it comes to, reaching out to brokers or, doing meetups, or that, that kind of thing. But, ultimately, you all have your own relationships. So, to be transparent, we're figuring that out because it's been not quite 2 years yet. And we've been in deals. Just when you're in deals, it's really hard to balance doing the deal and growing the business at the same time, at least on your first deal. And I would argue your second deal, you're still learning processes to become more efficient. On this deal that we're doing now, I would say we're tuned pretty good to where, we can hit the critical dates and still do the growing the business side at the same time, right? Things like this podcast or doing meetups or starting a YouTube channel to grow a following or making those relationships with PE groups, right? Those are things that are important. So yeah, I mean, I think you understand this, but if you can build a team that you can work together and understand each other's strengths, maybe someone's a better underwriter. Like one of my partners, I'll underwrite something and I'm like, hey, this passes the sniff test. I've gotten a budget from a PM. The insurance is good. I've crossed the T's and dotted as many I's as I can. You take a look at it. And I call him the deal killer. I'm like, hey, you try to kill this deal for me. Right. Or he'll go more in depth on the local market. What is the path of progress? I think you mentioned that earlier. Right. So, path of progress, very, very, closer comps, brokers tend to use comps from a pretty broad area, right? So he'll do that. So yeah, everyone has their strengths. We're still figuring it out. We haven't officially, titled, chief whatever, but yes, it's if you can do it up front, that'd be great.
Awesome.
We went through a warming up period. I met Eric Shirley first. He was first of the 4 Oaks that I met. And it was the same thing that Nathan said. We realized that we were competing. We realized we were talking to the same brokers. And for us, it was literally collaborating on this much, and, a little bit at a time. And when we realized we were competing, we started talking about, okay, which brokers are you talking with? And at first, we agreed to collaborate on everything from 2 brokers because those were the 2 brokers that we were both talking to. Mm-hmm. And eventually, we expanded our collaboration to the point to where we both trusted each other enough to basically go together, as far as a business goes. So I would say it's just like getting married. You date a lot of people first. All right. And then you start singling off. You find somebody that you like a little more than everybody else. And you test run. So end of the day, I think that's the best way to put it is it's just like getting married. You date first, you find somebody you like, and tie the knot.
I really like that analogy actually, because that's kind of where we're looking at what we're looking at doing too. We feel like with our first deal or a second deal, we might work with a few people, but we're not officially partners forever with those people, and it's more of a test drive, or dating as you call it.
Yeah.
I have one more question. So my husband and I are looking at submitting our first LOI next week. There's a call to offers for a deal nearby. What advice do you have or more so, what things are we maybe not considering or might be missing before we take this pretty decent step in acquiring our first property?
So I would ask, do you have an early access clause in there to be able to, do some due diligence before you put any money down, earnest money?
We do not. So I'm writing these things down as you go.
It's a way to save yourself, because to be competitive, it's almost impossible to not put earnest money hard day one. And that's day one as of fully executing the PSA. Whereas if you can get them to agree to a week, 10 days, 14 days of an early access, typically you have to pay for that early access. So this deal we just did, we paid them, we literally just wired $10,000 into the seller's account that not escrow, just for the right to go onto the property and do due diligence beforehand. And that helps us save, in our case, $200,000 potentially of earnest money. So early access is important. I'm sure you've gotten a budget. If you can get a second budget, great. And also, I would call the broker and talk to them and say, here's where we're coming in, right? Do you have any guidance that would make us a better offer? A lot of people are hesitant to use that app on their phone that's called Phone, right? They just want to text and email. And it makes a big difference if you pick up the phone and talk to them, because there's a lot of nuances you get over the phone versus calling. So I'm sure your offer is great. I would ask for an early access agreement. That way you're not risking as much capital, and then build that relationship by calling them and getting guidance. Because you don't want to, we'll call and say, hey, here's kind of where we're at. Is it worth us for us to submit an LOI? Or are we just going to offend the seller, right? Usually they'll say no, you're like, oh, you're way off, don't even bother. Or they'll say, no, you won't offend the seller, bring us your offer. I definitely don't want to stop you from submitting an LOI. It's just, I do see a lot of LOIs that seem like they've just kind of been shotgunning out, and they're just like, hey, if we get this, we'll figure it out, right? And we've actually had a few deals come back on the market, including this one. So this will be our second deal, our third deal, but our second deal that's come back on the market where we were second in line and they chose us, right? And then now we have a bit of a track record to say, hey, we're going to close because of this upfront work and due diligence that we do. There's no retrading, right? You want to make the seller comfortable that you're going to close and that you're not going to retrade on this property.
Yeah, I'll take that last statement a little further. There's two parts to the offer. There's the number on the paper, but there's also your ability to close, and that's what you want to. That's where the conversation with the broker really helps out. Is when that broker turns around and presents your offer to the owner, you want that broker to say, I think this group is really, going to close. I think they have a great chance of closing. And because there's two parts to it, and the broker is going to talk to the owner, and he's going to give his honest opinion of each group. So you want to make sure that the what's on paper looks good, but you also want to make sure that you're presenting, yourself and your team as a group that's able to close on the property you guys are putting the offer in on.
Got it. So. Definitely, I appreciate that. The early access is something that we'll definitely need to look into and possibly incorporate there, because it makes sense. It's honestly helpful for both parties. Because they don't want to go through 30, 60 days and then find out closing's not happening.
Exactly. A seller should appreciate it, honestly, because it will save them time as well in the long term, instead of getting tied up with you, like you just said, for a much longer period when you haven't done your due diligence and you could end up walking away, right? So.
All right, well, we're about out of time here, so I've got one question for each of you. Nathan, you get to go first. How can listeners learn more about you?
Well, like I said, my partners and I are, recently officially came together. I know we're not under our own individual umbrellas anymore, so we don't have a fancy website for anyone yet. But so for now, just be email, honestly. Okay. And that would be nathan@investwithamg.com. Invest with AMG. It's Atlas Multifamily Group. So that's the best way to get a hold of me.
All right, we're going to have that in the show notes. If you're looking to get a hold of Nathan for any reason, swipe, tap, and you'll be able to email him. All right, Kayla, same question for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yes, the best way to get in contact with me is LinkedIn. Kayla Wilmot, my first and last name on LinkedIn. I can also be reached through our website, marlindynamicinvestments.com.
All right, awesome. We're going to have a link to her social media profile and the website in the show notes as well. So thanks again to both of you for coming on the show. It's a great conversation we had, and I enjoyed my time. Hope you guys did too.
Yes, thanks for putting this on, Brian. Appreciate it. Good to meet you, Kayla, and thank you for your for being a physician's assistant during this time.
Thank you.
Toughest job in the world right now.